One of the reasons that we are looking to repeal DRIPA is exactly what we're experiencing right now in British Columbia, and that is an uncertainty of how this aligns with BC laws and the risk of having to rush the work of reconciliation and by way of the courts rather than people who were elected to make those changes to our laws here in BC.
And why now?
Well, I think with the mounting pressure of the court decisions that are now coming down from the BC Supreme Court, it's becoming clear in the public's view that reconciliation is absolutely necessary, and it is a responsibility that we take very seriously. But there are ways that we can trip over our own feet with good intentions, and that it also has to be done carefully.
Now, what do you make of the decision last week, the BC Court of Appeal ruling in favor of the First Nations?
What I see in looking deeper into these court decisions is that the courts are essentially doing what they are intended to do. And that is to take the law as it's written, as it's put in front of them, and make a decision based on previous court cases that have, entrenched Indigenous rights into both provincial and federal systems, and they're meant to just interpret the law as it's written and as it's presented to them, and so. In doing so, because DRIPA adds a layer of onus for the province to bring legislative laws at that level, in line with UNDRIP, they made the decision that was correct from their point of view. And so this is why when we rush these things, there can be consequences that, it was never meant to muddy the waters of reconciliation, but I believe that's what we're seeing now.
Well, DRIPA, it passed unanimously with support from all parties in 2019. Now, what do you think has changed since then?
I think it is these court cases coming to light again in full view of the public, and people having a greater understanding of the diversity and a distinctive based approach that, really, we cannot paint all communities across British Columbia the same. We won't deal with a community in the north the same way that we would deal with the Squamish or the Musqueam or some of these communities that are closer to city centers. And so it's not a one size fits all. And unfortunately, DRIPA draws some pretty broad strokes that, again, I go back to, if the judge is able to look at this and make a ruling this big that's going to impact all of BC laws immediately, I think we need to take a step back and try to do a reassessment and a pivot.
Well, and what do you think was the original intent of DRIPA in your mind?
In my mind, as I was watching this unfold, as an Indigenous person who fully believes that we need to be going after our rights and trying to rectify the harms of the past, I actually felt at the time that there were good intentions on all sides. That's why it received the support that it did in the House. Were there reservations? Were there debates to be had at the time? Absolutely. But I don't think that in creating something that is supposed to be good for reconciliation, anyone ever thought that we would see it play out this way. But we have to be realistic. We have to be able to recalibrate. We have to be able to do what's fair for everybody. And unfortunately, from my perspective, that means rolling back from pigeonholing the BC government and having every single law come into full force alignment with something like UNDRIP, and being able to do things properly one step at a time.
Yesterday on the program, I spoke with former NDP MLA Melanie Mark. She was the first Indigenous woman to be elected to the legislature. And here's a little bit of what she had to say about all of this.
we all want prosperity, but not when we're trampling on the rights of Indigenous people. And with all due respect, Gloria, what worries me the most is the fear-mongering from the official opposition and what a circus it would be to see Trevor and his colleagues in the legislature making a mockery of Indigenous rights that we've fought long and hard for protecting. I've said time and time again, being Niska, we've been briefcase warriors coming to the table time and time again to defend our rights, and that's not going to stop.
Again, that was former NDP MLA Melanie Mark. So, Líya, when you hear that, I mean, do you worry that you're creating division or fear-mongering, as Melanie Mark puts it?
I don't believe so. I don't ever make any claims or create a position for myself that I don't full-heartedly believe in. And Melanie is totally entitled to her opinion on that matter, and we have opinions on all sides of any discussion that we're going to have. But I also come from a long line of people who have fought for our rights through treaties and fought for our rights through the courts, just as we're seeing now. And so I don't fault anybody for having their position in the discussion. But again, I go back to, from my point of view, we've put the cart before the horse. We have over 200 communities, very distinct communities, big and small, across this province right now, today, that may have overlapping title claims all over development lands and again, lands that are close to cities, different projects that we want to have go forward for the prosperity of all of British Columbia. And I've said this in other interviews, we depend on one another. Indigenous communities depend on BC. BC depends on Indigenous communities. And if we're truly going to create a relationship that is going to be successful, then it needs to be a healthy relationship. And we need to bring a majority of voters, of people along in this province. And right now, the province is in an economic squeeze, maybe one of the most detriment times we've ever seen. So if we don't have a successful province, then we don't have a successful Indigenous communities. And it goes vice versa. It goes both ways. And so although it might seem shocking that someone like me would have this position and this opinion about a legislation, I'm not saying pull back Indigenous rights. I'm not saying let's claw back reconciliation, and neither are any of my colleagues. I think what we're saying is that we need to take pause, use UNDRIP the way it was intended to guide the work that we do, and we need to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work of settling title in this province. And I don't think that DRIPA is the right tool to do that.
Well, we have heard from Premier David Eby in the past week. He says he will look into revising DRIPA. So how exactly would you like to see it change?
There's definitely going to be compromise in the discussion, and that's fair. I go back to DRIPA as a whole was created from United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. That's because Indigenous people around the world have fallen victim to the process of colonization. What's unique about British Columbia is that we have Section 35, which protects title. That's been proven court case after court case after court case. And that's being refined as time goes on, And we also have the Human Rights Charter, which protects everybody's rights, the rights to freedom and, all the equal rights that we should have as Canadians and British Columbians. And so this layer of UNDRIP, because it's been ratified by Canada, those rights are also entrenched within the discussions and the systems that we all live in today. Again, I go back to with DRIPA, there's so much duplication in that. And there are things that should really be innate. Of course, we should protect our culture, our languages. We should have equal access to education and to healthcare that suits our specific Indigenous identity. But I don't think that we need legislation to tell us to be good humans. The legislation itself is very duplicitous, and we can do the hard work that we need to do with Indigenous communities, one community, one discussion, one deal, one negotiation at a time. That's the responsibility we have as government. So through this legislation, it puts too much onus, I think, for us to get to a place that's going to take years to get to if we're going to bring everybody along.
We appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
That is Líya Warbus, the opposition House Leader and BC Conservative MLA for Chilliwack-Cultus Lake.